All right, in our first half hour, we took a closer look at Illinois politics, and now we're on the other side of the river to see what lawmakers have been up to in Iowa. Right now, bills are being debated, passed, and signed. So joining us now is Dana Searles of our sister station, WOI in Des Moines. All right, Dana, late last week, the Iowa House and Senate passed the hands-free driving bill. It's on its way to Governor Reynolds' desk. This would ban cell phone use while driving, but there's another cell phone ban you've been watching. What's going on with the classroom ban?
Yeah, so with the hands-free driving bill, that one has obviously seen a lot of support all throughout the legislative session, and we've seen that by bringing it to Governor Reynolds' desk. But now when it comes to the classroom cell phone ban, that's also something seen a lot of support, but it kind of is in the bouncing back and forth portion right now. So it actually just passed out of the Senate with almost unanimous support, but it goes back to the House now. It already passed the House, but then it was sent to the Senate, and the Senate ended up adding an amendment to it to send it back to the House. So they must vote on that amendment in order to send it to Governor Reynolds' desk. And simply what that amendment does is set that exact date to be May 1st of this year that the Department of Education would have to give guidance to schools on what that minimum ban would look like. So then it'll go back to the House, and if the House passes that bill as is, then it'll go to Governor Reynolds' desk.
Well, another bill that has to do with teenagers is all about firearms. The Iowa House passed a bill that would let younger Iowans buy guns. The age would be lowered from 21 to 18, but this comes as the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says firearm homicide rates are highest among teens, young adults, and those numbers are rising. But this was a bipartisan vote, so what's going on here?
So the statistic that you just talked about, I think, is exactly the reason why those opposed to the bill are opposed to it, is because of concerns of gun violence just rising across the country as a whole. However, those for the bill think that it should be lowered to 18, specifically to carry pistols, is I think what the bill says. Those for it say that it should be lowered to 18 because you can serve in the military when you're 18. So they think that if you can do that and hold that role, then you should be able to also carry a pistol in the state.
Well, moving to food, low-income Iowans could face higher restrictions on what they can buy with SNAP dollars under a bill that already passed the Iowa House on Wednesday. So what would those restrictions be?
So basically what the bill says, it would direct the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services to apply for a waiver for these SNAP benefits. So currently there's a requirement of what's all allowed in SNAP benefits, but the waiver that this bill would want to pass is essentially only making it available to healthier foods for Iowans. So they really want to promote things like dairy, meat, eggs, stuff that is locally grown and more just natural whole foods. So it would basically be a waiver, but that waiver would be to really boost up that dairy, meat, and eggs.
And of course, even if that passes in Iowa, the federal government has to sign off on that waiver as well. So more to watch there. But finally, Dana, Governor Reynolds wants to expand healthcare services in rural areas. You know, last week, her bill overwhelmingly passed the House. This would overhaul the state's loan repayment program to try to get more healthcare professionals to underserved areas. But that wasn't the only health bill that was getting some movement this past week. What have you been watching when it comes to pesticides?
So the pesticide legislation is a big bill that we've been watching. It was, introduced last legislative session, but ultimately didn't reach the finish line. But a bill that we are watching would essentially shield pesticide manufacturers from certain lawsuits. So the bill says if they have a federally approved label on that pesticide manufacturer product, then they would be essentially immune or essentially not held liable if a lawsuit were to say that they didn't accurately warn them of potential health risks. So all they would really need is that federally approved label in order to have a lawsuit not impact them when it comes to saying, you didn't warn them. You didn't warn somebody on the health risks of it. So that one's something that's a little bit tricky, but we are seeing it pop back up this legislative session. So it'll be interesting to watch. And then in terms of Governor Reynolds' rural health care bill, that was a big bill that has seen a lot of support, both bipartisan support, both sides of the aisle throughout the session. But basically what it would do, like you said, combine Iowa's student loan repayment program to increase that funding by $10 million. If you commit to teaching in Iowa's high demand areas for 5 years, you would be eligible eligible for that repayment program. The bill also would create a projected 115 new residency slots across the state in Iowa's teaching hospitals. So that's big changes that I definitely wanted to note there.
Yeah, definitely going to be something to watch moving forward. Dina, thank you so much for your time with us once again. And as always, we've compiled our political coverage for both sides of the river at WQAD.com. Just click on the As Seen on TV tab at the top of the homepage.